Good afternoon or good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Smart Wedding Workflow. So today we'll be talking about mostly workflow, file management, and some batch operations, and finally processing, all designed around being fast and efficient within a wedding. Today is a bit different as it's not just me as well as myself. I'm the guy at the top, David, part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. And also we have Alex. Alex, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hello, good stuff. You are there loud and clear. So Alex also works on the same team. He's a photographer in his own right, so he's best equipped out of any of us to show exactly the best method of dealing with a wedding and all the fun stuff that comes with that. And as I said, mostly being efficient and so on with your file management, batch operations, and finally exporting. Isn't that right?
Yes, yes, it
Yes.
is. Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Well, this is the second time we've done this today, so it's going to be even better than this morning. So, as usual,
Definitely.
we have 60 minutes, and we used all of those this morning and a few more. So we'll probably do the same, I would think, this afternoon. You're very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. If you look at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see the last section is called questions. Put a question in there that will come through to me. I will moderate those and feed them through to Alex. Don't be disappointed if your specific question isn't answered, as there is quite a lot of you, and I'll just answer the most common threads. We are recording the session too, so if you want to watch it again tomorrow, then look out for the follow-up email, which you'll get probably around this time tomorrow, and you can go straight to our YouTube channel and watch this webinar, and of course any of the others that we've done over the past years as well. So that's all the admin side of things. I'm going to pass the torch, as it were, over to Alex. So we're going to make Alex the presenter.
Yes.
And in theory, we should be able to see your screen right now. Yes, which we can. And the first thing you'll see actually is not Capture One, but the very important blog post that this is based on, correct?
Yes. So I basically wrote this this blog post to make it easier for people using Capture One and doing weddings or wedding-like jobs. To use Capture One and the asset management within Capture One. Because when you have everything about that under control and there's no confusion about how to use it, there's more time for the fun stuff, that is editing the images and shooting them. So this is basically going to be about how you optimize your workflow, or how you can optimize your workflow, because there are many ways to do it, but this is just the one I prefer. To give yourself more time to edit and actually shoot, because this is about importing, managing, and exporting. So if you haven't already read this blog post, it's completely okay, because we're going to show all of it and more. If you're not familiar with sessions, then you've come to the right place, because we are going to start with that. Many of you are probably using catalogs. Actually, could we have a poll about the current raw converter, David?
Yeah, let's do that. Yep, let's throw up a poll on screen. So you're going to lose Alex's screen for a minute and see a poll. So if you could answer that, that would be great. As Alex was just starting to say, sessions are totally unique to Capture One, a different form of file management to a catalog or a library, as you may know it in Lightroom, but it's particularly suited to this kind of, how would we describe it, Alex? I guess a single project.
Single job, where you want to have everything gathered per job.
In one place, yeah. So all your raws in one place, all your outputs, all your selects, everything in one single folder structure, as opposed to part of a larger catalog, for example. So those of you on Capture One, if you haven't heard of sessions or used sessions, you're probably going to find this very interesting because I use sessions and catalogs. There's a place for them both to be used in your workflow. And for those of you on Lightroom, this is totally unique to Capture One. It is independent of any catalog. They are not part of a catalog. It's just a completely separate way to set up a job. So thank you for those who have answered, which was most of you. So I'm going to close that poll down now. And yes, we can see your screen again, Alex.
Okay. Let's just start from the beginning and create a completely new session so you can see how to do that.
Good idea.
You can do it from here. No matter if you're in a session or a catalog, you can just click the plus sign here or go to File, New Session. So let's do that. And let's call it the name of the couple. And this is going to be an imaginary couple, of course. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to place this session on my desktop. So when I select the desktop as the location for this session, it's going to create the session, of course, on the desktop, but the whole session, if you right-click up here and go one down, this is just a shortcut to see the actual location of the session. So it's on my desktop here called Lisa Paul, and within that I have 4 empty folders ready to use in this session. The session database file is this one, and that includes everything you do with albums and stuff like that in here. But the 4 folders here are ready to be used, and that's basically the structure or the nest of folders that is a session. The default folder to put images into or importing images into would be the capture folder. So let's assume that we just came back from a wedding with 2,000 images, and we have shot them with several cameras maybe. So can we get a poll on how many cameras you use for a wedding?
Yes. So same as before. Oops, that's the wrong one. I'm going to choose a different poll. Here we go. Launch poll. So how many cameras do you typically use at a wedding? So we had some very strong people this morning who used 4 or more cameras, which is impressive. But again, as it was this morning, over half used 2. And then the rest is split equally between 1 and 3 cameras. So most of you seem to be using at least 2, if not 3. So thank you again for voting. I shall close that down and you will see Alex's screen on again. Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So personally, I use 2 cameras as well. So I have right now placed all the images for this webinar in this folder. So it's just, I think, 500 or so raw files that I'm going to put inside the capture folder. And you can do that in several ways. You can import as you're used to, and then select the source, that's your wedding folder, or could be your CF cards or whatever. And then the destination should be into the capture folder. But this is not the only way to do it when you work in a session. You can actually skip the import dialog. If you want to learn everything about the import dialog, there is tutorials and webinars about that.
And weddings.
Let's skip it for now and actually do it a bit more manually, so you can see how sessions function, because that capture folder corresponds to the capture folder in my session out here. And if you don't know exactly where to find it, you can right-click and say Show in Finder. And I think on Windows it's called Show in Explorer, because that's operating system dependent, of course. But if I click here, it's going to show my capture folder. Then let's take the raw files from my external hard drive and select all of them and copy them into this capture folder in here. So this could actually be done without even having Capture One open. And as you can see, as I'm copying the files into the capture folder and being in the capture folder inside Capture One, it's starting to populate. And it's also, if we open the activity monitor here, it's already generating previews and it's following along quite well.
And you could be doing exactly the same thing from memory cards, of course.
Yes, so you can copy this from anywhere into any of these capture folders or session folders.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually already start looking through your images and start rating them as they are copied in and as the previews are being generated. You could also unpack your camera bag or go grab a cup of coffee while this is being done. But you can basically start working straight away. If you've read my blog post, I in the beginning say that you want to split up your images into different parts of the wedding. And this is a typical Danish wedding, so I don't know how weddings in your country might work. But for this particular wedding, there was a ceremony, and then I shot the portraits, and then there was a reception, and then we moved on to the dinner. So those 4 parts of the wedding, I want to split these images into, both for what you say, asset management purposes, and to be able to easily find the portraits among the maybe thousands of images. So the way to do this, or one of the ways to do this, is to go back into your session in here. And inside the session folder, you can just manually create a folder, let's call it ceremony, and create a folder called, what's the next one? Portraits.
Portraits, yep.
And select the next one and call it reception. And the last one and call it dinner. Now, as you might have noticed, nothing is happening inside Capture One just because I add folders within the session folder. That's because I have to add them as session favorites. And the easy way to do that is simply to select all of them like this and drag and drop into session favorites. Now I have them here. Let me just rearrange them like this. Okay, perfect. I'm a bit OCD about that. So now I have empty folders ready to be populated with these images. And the reason for adding them to favorites is that any image I might put into one of these folders will be added to the session database. So it's searchable and stuff like that. So let's quickly split all the images up into these 4 folders. And please, if you have any questions about what I'm doing, fire away and David will launch them right at me.
Yep, and I've been answering some in the background as well. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask a question.
Okay, great. The reason I asked you about how many cameras you use for weddings is because if you've used several cameras to shoot a wedding, you might have used them very fast after one another, or what it's called, so they might overlap in the chronological order. So what is very important before you go out to a wedding is to synchronize the time of all your cameras. Capture One, as it is now, is not allowed to change any info of the RAW file whatsoever, so it cannot change the time of capture. But if you make sure to synchronize all your cameras, you can then sort all your images by date. That didn't really change anything because they were already sorted with the one camera I shot all of these with, but the rest will be sorted chronologically after when they were shot. And by having all the images sorted by date, I can select all of them and then right-click and batch rename. That will now enable me to give them a personal name that is, one can say, honoring the chronological order of this wedding, regardless of what camera they are shot with. So once again, select all of them, batch rename, and then you get this dialog up here. And oh, this is a leftover from the previous webinar earlier today. It already has the correct input, but let's empty it out like this. So in format, you can open this menu that will give you some tokens. And what did we, I think it was job name. So if
Job
you
name,
double click that one,
yep,
and then make manually an underscore. I just like to separate the job name from the counter, which is going to be a 4-digit counter. And I just double click to get it up there. And there we go. Right now the job is untitled job. I don't want that. I want it to be Lisa Paul. You could also, instead of job name, use document name within general as well. Document is a shared term for sessions and catalogs, so it will take the name of your session and then use that completely automatically. And now, as you can see, the counter starts at 495. That was a result of the last batch rename I did. So if I click up here and say reset rename counter, it's going to start at 1. And rename. Whoops, do not show again. This is something with RAW and JPEG pairing, but since I'm shooting all my images in RAW, that's not going to bother me at all. Proceed. Good. So I'll just take a sip of my my water while it renews.
And you see the renaming is pretty quick, and in case you, well, Alex is having a drink, in case you didn't get the idea of the token, if you loved algebra at school, I guess it's a very similar thing to that, that the token is a dynamic entity which takes, for example, as you saw, the job name, which Alex then typed in, or the document name in this case, which is Lisa Paul. The digit counter is, obviously just a counter from 0 up to, in this case, 9,999. So there's tokens which point towards all kinds of things about images, and you'll see some more of those when we do processing as well.
Yes, it's kind of a unique feature to Capture One, I think. But
yes.
Once you get over the confusion about it and the intimidation, I might even say, and you get familiar with them, they are super useful.
Yes, and a lifesaver and a time saver.
Yes.
Yeah, for
yes.
sure.
All of that. So the reason for renaming them was not only aesthetics. It's also that I can now sort by name, which is the default sorting arrangement both here and outside of Capture One. So now they will be in chronological order regardless of where I look at them. So that's good. Okay, now for splitting them up into these folders. So if I select the first image here and then just scroll down to find the last image of the ceremony, I think that is down here. Then I simply drag and drop into ceremony. This will physically move the files to the ceremony folder on my computer, as you can see. So before they were in the capture folder, but now they have been moved to ceremony. So that was the first part. Then we're going to go to portraits. I think it goes all the way to this one. Great. Portraits into this folder. This might seem a bit like you might think, why is he even doing that? Isn't that just a waste of time? And it might be, but when you see why I'm doing it later in the process, you might understand. And of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is not the correct way to do it. This is just a way to do it that I find useful. Mm-hmm. So basically, you can have Capture One accommodate any workflow. I just want you to be aware of all the possibilities that's present. So
I think doing it this way makes delivery easier and viewing easier for your wedding client, I would think.
Yes. Yes.
Not to spoil too much, but when we come to processing, I think that will be more obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And also, if I later want to go in and find a specific portrait, I shouldn't have to scroll through hundreds, maybe thousands of images.
Yes.
So it's going to be easy to just click here and then see the portraits. So the last part here is from the dinner, all up until the very midnight dance and everything. I don't know what the traditions are in your country.
It's pretty similar in the UK, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's copying here after the the Midnight Dance by the Couple. It's a Danish tradition that the groom's friends lift him up and then take one of his shoes off and cut away the toe of his socks.
Oh, okay, that's pretty unique to Denmark, I would
Yes,
think.
and nobody knows why, and we just keep doing it because it's
something
fun.
you do.
Yes. Okay, great. So now we have all images split into these 4 physical folders. Now, you of course want to browse through and find the ones you like and do your rating in one big folder. That's why we have this session smart album called All Images. 5 stars is a default smart album that will include any image that you give 5 stars from the very beginning. So if I go into the ceremony and click 5 stars here and then go back to 5 stars, it's going to include that one. So this is a dynamic album that updates and populates with whatever image you rate or do something to that matches the criteria. So I hope that makes sense. But let's start by sorting through the images. Actually, let's start by removing this bar down here because I want the image to be as big as possible. So I do that from View, Hide Viewer Labels. Boom. Usually I just go through the images with the arrow keys on my keyboard and then give all the ones I might like 5 stars. I can always trash them later in the process, but I don't want to accidentally maybe skip an image that I might like later in the process, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I keep all the yeses and maybes and then sort out the maybes later. So I'm obviously not going to sort through 500 images I can see. I'm going to do it in a different way. So imagine that I am now sorting through all my images and giving 5 stars to all the ones I like. I'm going to do it in batches.
And the shortcut for that, which you probably all know, but just in case not, is pressing 5 on your keyboard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the various different star ratings. And
yes.
I hope you can see, for those of you who have perhaps, if I can cheekily say, struggling with performance issues on other raw converters, that moving through quantities of images, multiple selects like this, and tagging and so on, there is virtually no, or actually no delay from going from one select to another select as well. And even if you wanted to zoom in and check focus and so on, then you'll find there's virtually no delay at all to do so. Of course, it's very much machine independent, but Capture One will gobble up all the resources it can. So you're not restricted by, if you have a super powerful, amazing Mac or PC, then Capture One will make use of it for sure. And you can see even on a modest laptop that Alex and I use, zooming in to 100% is near instantaneous as well.
Yes. Of course, it's a retina display, so it's not zooming in that much because half of my images are shot with a Nikon D3S. So that's kind of a low resolution compared to what you can get out there. It's only 12 megapixels. But some of the images in here are shot with a Nikon D810. That is 36 megapixels. So it's a good mix of both. I think here we have one from the 810, and you can see it's equally fast, actually. So no problem there whatsoever. Great. Now we can actually jump to the 5 stars smart album, because I have rated 177 images. You can also use the filters down here. If you go to all images and then just click here. That's another way to do it. But since there is a default smart album called 5 stars, I'm just going to use that. So this will now show me all images that has a 5-star rating. And I am going, the next thing I will show you is how to copy images, or sorry, how to copy adjustments between images. Because when you are going to edit hundreds of images, editing one image at a time will slowly kill you. And you don't want that. You want it to be fast and fun and still achieve a great result as if you would actually edit them individually every time. So if we go to the first image here and just give it some edits here. Actually, let me just show you what I like to do when editing, especially weddings. The default color in the viewer is very dark. That's not even a color, but that's what we call it. It's dark gray. I like to make it white, and that's done by going into the preferences. And then within the appearance here, you change the color to white, because that gives me kind of a complete white reference that I like better than having a black surrounding. It kind of neutralizes my eyes a bit. So if you like that, that's where you go. Also, the proof margin. I've made the proof margin very big. That's also from in here. It's around 80 pixels. So if I ever need space around the image to really like get deep into the colors of it without being too distracted by completely dark surrounding, that's how I do it. I've also made a keyboard shortcut to do it. It's Command 1. And that's done within Edit Keyboard Shortcuts. And this keyboard shortcut is called Viewer Mode, and then Toggle Proof Margin. And if you see throughout the webinar that the image jumps like this, that's just a bad habit from my side, because I do that every time I edit images. So sorry about that in advance if that keeps happening. But now I have given this image some contrast, brightness, taken the saturation down a bit, and did some highlight recovery. This is actually a very beautiful church in Copenhagen. It's a bit like Game of Thrones. But to copy these, copy these settings to the next image, I can either press up here, copy adjustments from the primary variant, or I can use the shortcut, Command-Shift-C, or Control-Shift-C if you're on a Windows computer. And then you go to the next image, and if you like the arrows, you press the down arrow like that. Undo just to show, and if you like the keyboard shortcuts, it's Command-Shift-V or Control-Shift-V. So just as copy apply in many other programs with the additional shift as well. Of course, when you come outside, like here, you might need to tweak it a bit because it's shot under different circumstances. That's why I usually don't go many images ahead when copying and applying. So let's, for example, take this one. These are all shot under this kind of the same conditions. So I know it will work to copy across these images. But as soon as it's this image maybe, then it's a different situation, and I would need to just individually fine-tune it a bit. But let's keep edit this one. Oh, I can see that I don't have my custom workspace because I've reset it to default. I like to always take the white balance from the color tab and put it on top of my exposure like that, and then remove the histogram because I don't really care about the histogram when I have it in here. But I use the white balance a lot when I'm shooting natural light images. So let's just copy it across here. That's a very bright image. So we need some light adjustments there. Copy to this one. It's also very bright. And if I copy this one and paste it into here, it's okay. If I just bring back some highlights, there we go. And basically, this is how I go through a wedding. What I haven't shown you is the color balance tool. And this will also enable me to show you a second method of copying and applying adjustments in images. Because you can copy the entire set of adjustments you have made to an image, or you can take one tool at a time. And the way to do this is, let's first create a color grading that we actually like. If you have never used the color balance tool before, it's probably one of my favorite tools, if not the favorite tool in Capture One, because it's so easy to control, fine-tune the contrast using the luminosity slider out here for each area or each part, and also do some color grading for each part. So like this. And then if I want to apply it to these images, let's just do it with 6 images. There we go. It's better on the screen. So instead of doing it like before, copy, apply, if I have several images selected and I highlight the first image which has these settings that I want to copy, I can simply press or hold down the Shift on my keyboard and then press this double-sided arrow in this tool. And when I do that, boom, it copied the color grading of the color balance tool onto the rest of the images, but it didn't touch any of the other settings I've made. So let me just undo. There we go. And then hold down Shift, and if you keep an eye on the images in the middle and press here, there we go. You can see that they got a little of the same color grading that I made on this image. And you can basically...
Sorry, and just to interrupt, saying, I mean, that's for the color balance tool, but there's nothing to stop you doing that with noise reduction or sharpening or equally any of the tools in Capture One. So it's a great way to add one adjustment to everything without affecting anything else.
Yes. Let's actually just do it with sharpening. So let's say we wanted a custom amount of sharpening like this, and then by clicking Command A to select all of the images, click the first image that you have the correct adjustments on, hold down Shift, and click this one, and now any image will have 158 in sharpening, as you can see. So it's super fast to apply any adjustment on all images, basically across your whole session. Let me just show you an important part of copying adjustments. For example, this one. This image would need slight crop, I think. So if we click C to get the crop tool, or click up here as well, and then right-click on the image, we get the crop ratio menu. And I want to keep it as the original 3:2 aspect ratio. Then, whoops, I got the workspace there. Again, woo, it's getting late. There we go. So now this image has a crop. So if I simply copy it like before and then paste it onto the next image, it's going to include the crop. And you might not want that. So let's undo this one. And go up here, copy this, and now go into the adjustment clipboard. That's within this this tools app. And as you can see here, all tools that have an orange tick mark is what the clipboard will now paste onto whatever image you paste your settings onto. And as you can see down here, composition is ticked. And to remove that, you simply click it, it goes away, you go to the next image, you apply it, and it will ignore the composition. So that's a way to copy all of your settings but one, or maybe take a couple of them away before applying, but you simply have control over what you're copying. So we're not going to go into detail about editing wedding images, because that is super subjective and very much about your own opinion and taste. So we'll keep it to speeding up your workflow. So let's say that
can be a webinar for the future, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's say that we have edited all of these images. We have done editing all of these images in color. And when it comes to weddings, I know a photographer should know if he wants to deliver his images in black and white or color. But especially when, actually only with weddings, I like to deliver all images in both, because I think it shouldn't be up to me if it should be a black and white or color. It should be up to the client, and they don't know until they see it. So it's kind of a service I do, and it doesn't take me very long. Let me just start by dividing the images all the color images here for easier asset management. So if I select all of them and then right click, go to color tag and select red, I'm going to make all the images red, and make sure you have this one enabled. It toggles between edit primary only, which is the one that you have highlighted like this, or editing all the images at once. And it's the same with processing. So if you find yourself selecting multiple images and click process, but it only exports one image, this is the reason. Okay, so now we have all the color images edited and rated with 5 stars and giving a red color label. So what I will do now is create a new Smart Album over here in Session Albums. If I click the plus and then go down to Smart Album, I will call this Smart Album Color. And I will add a criteria by clicking the plus sign here and call it Color Tag. And this is a typical engineering development language, is or is not. It's binary. So I select is and red. Click OK. So this new Smart Album will now include all images that have a red color tag. And as you can see, it already populated with all the red images. Then let's go to 5 stars again, because I have all my images selected here. I now want to clone all the images to a second variant, which I will make black-white. So by having all of them selected, I clone them, and then we get a new variant of each image completely similar to the one we just made. And by having all of these selected, I do the same again, right-click, color tag, but give them, let's say, a green color tag. And there are shortcuts for these color tags. If you use your keyboard and press the minus button, it will give it a red color tag, and if you press the plus button, it will give it the green color tag. And
easy.
Yeah, and these images are going to be black and white. So I create a new Smart Album, call it black-white, click the plus, color tag is green. And if I click here, you can see it's now all the green tagged images that's in the Smart Album. So what I can do here is, if I go to the Adjustments tool tab, I have styles and presets here. So if I select all of them, go to the built-in styles, it could also be user styles that you have bought or created yourself. But let's say we want to Portrait 2. That actually looks pretty okay on all the images. So if I apply this, there we go. All the images in this black and white session album is now black and white. As you can see, color images and black and white. So now the images are actually done and divided into folders and split into albums, whether they are black and white or in color. And now it's time to export all these images to deliver them to the client.
Yes, the fun part.
Yes, and actually it sounds like we're going to be done in 2 minutes. We are not.
No.
So sit tight, because this is going to be fun, and this is where you can really save a big chunk of time on exporting. Because what I like to do when I deliver a wedding is to deliver all images in 2 sizes. I want the full resolution if they want to print them, and I would like to deliver a smaller version for Facebook or emailing or whatever they want, because they shouldn't email images at maybe 6 or 8 megabyte each when they can do a smaller version.
Correct. And I think it's good to point out that even though what we're going to show now, that the setup looks quite long as such, remember you only have to do this once. So once you've decided on your perfect solution for processing, then this is a one-time operation, and then you can just simply access the process recipes that you're going to see in a minute and do it again. So honestly shouldn't think, oh my God, I've got to do this for every single wedding. It's once you decide on your workflow, you set it up once, and then it's consistent and it's repeatable and it's fast. And that's the whole point of the process recipes that you're going to see.
Yes, and it's also very, very easily customizable afterwards. So if you
Yes,
create a setup and you think, oh, this is not working for me, it's very easy to fix every little thing about it.
correct.
So if you have never worked with process recipes, that's within this tiny gear here. A process recipe is a set of settings that you want the current file to be exported to. You can have multiple process recipes selected at the same time. So when you process, it'll execute all the recipes that you have selected. So let me just start by creating one called wedding print, because that's going to be the big one. Let me just deselect the Facebook process recipe that I have up here. So when you create a new recipe, by default, it's a TIFF file and all sorts of stuff. But we don't want that, because TIFF is for professional use and very big files, and we should not deliver 200 TIFF files to a client that doesn't know anything about photography. So format, JPEG. It's going to, of course, gray out the 8 or 16-bit because JPEG is always 8-bit. Quality, even though it's for print, I would say it's okay to take it down to 90 because the conditions the images are shot under makes it very hard, if not impossible, to see any difference between 90 and 100, but it just cuts off the top of the file size. ICC profile, I will leave that to Adobe RGB should they send the images to a professional print company. Scale is by default fixed to 100%, and I will leave it to that. So this is the information about the file size. Now comes the fun part, where to put the actual file. And by default, it says output location in the root folder. When it says output location, that means it's going down here to output location tool. It's a bit confusing, but bear with me. And destination is set to output. And these tiny arrows beside it, if you click that, it'll just open that folder, so you know where this folder is actually located. And as you can see, it's the output folder within the session we made in the very beginning of the webinar called Lisa Poll on the desktop. So that's a correct folder. But we, of course, don't want to put all images in different sizes and black and white into the same folder, because that's going to be one big melting pot of confusion. So if we, in the subfolder here, click this tiny menu out here, you get a token menu. And this might look a bit overwhelming because there are so many tokens you can use, but let's make it simple. So first, if you write anything manually like this, that means it's going to create a folder with the name that you write. So the first folder we're going to split the images into is going to be print. So we're going to split all images into print or resized. So let's write print. And then to make a subfolder within print, you create a backslash. Whoops. There we go. And now we want to put the images into the image folder name, or the, we want to put the images into a folder with the name of which part of the wedding the image is from. So within print, it's going to be split up into the 4 folders that I made in the very beginning. So ceremony, portraits, reception, and dinner. And that's done by just double-clicking the image folder name. And to find that easily, you just go to the group that's called General, and then you double-click image folder name. There we go. But I want to create an additional folder within this folder. So you can actually see it now samples this as print, ceremony, and then empty name, because I've made a backslash indicating that there's going to be another folder, but I haven't added anything to it yet. The last token I'm going to add is the collection name, because a collection is the joint name for any album or session folder you might be in. So if I double click on this, it's going to add color, because this image, which is the image it's sampling from, is within the color image folder. So it's now going to put the color folder into a ceremony folder, and put that ceremony folder into a print folder, and put that print folder into my output folder. Okay, that was a big chunk of information to swallow.
Yeah,
So,
and I think once you run the processes, then it'll make more sense when you see the actual output.
yes.
But if you remember image folder name, so at the start Alex divided up the images into those different folders: ceremony, portraits, reception. So Capture One will create an output folder with the same name of where the image belongs as such, whether that's in ceremony, portraits, reception, or dinner, and the collection name is, for example, whether it's color or black and white. So this is actually, I think who was asking earlier, it was Yorick who was asking earlier, why not use just session albums? This is a very powerful way to use both to give you these great options on export.
Let me just add a bit to that answer, because a session album or collection name will only take the name of the collection you are processing from. So to distinguish between if it's color or black and white, or if it's actually in a physical folder, I'm using image folder and collection name, because an image can be in multiple session albums, but it can only be in one physical folder. So Capture One knows exactly which physical folder to take the image folder name from, and which collection to take the collection name from. So it can do both. And if you go and read the blog post afterwards, I have actually only used session albums, but that makes it a bit more tedious in the export process. By doing it this way, the export process is basically just 2 clicks, and then everything is going to be divided as we want. We're going to make a second recipe. Please don't disconnect. It's we're going to do it a bit faster, but still explain everything. I'm going to call it Wedding Resized. So the same as before, JPEG and resized. I'm going to make it 80 quality, because this is not going to be used for something serious. This is just going to be used online for fun and Facebook and stuff like that. And because it's going to be used primarily online, I changed the ICC profile to sRGB. Scaling, that's a good one, because I can select long edge, which will take the longest edge of the image and make it whatever I set it here. And I want the unit to be pixels, and I want the pixels to be 2500. So now it will make small JPEG images of 2500 pixels on the long edge. Within file, again, I do the same as before. Actually, does it work if I copy it? Let's see.
Let's see.
No, it doesn't take the token.
Doesn't copy the
token.
token.
Bit of a stretch there, but it might be good to show it again.
Yes.
So open the menu, and then write resized manually. Add a backslash. Go to General, and then select Image Folder Name, backslash again, and collection name. So we can see resized, ceremony, color. The sample is always a good thing to check whether you're doing it correct or not. Just to show another type of token you can use, you could, for example, use the make of the camera. So if I double click here, it will say Nikon Corporation, because I'm using a Nikon camera. So there's tons of different tokens you can use.
Serial number of the camera as well, for example, if you wanted to split them up on import as well, or on export. So lots of things. Yeah.
So I have now created this as well. What I forgot in the print recipe, if I select that again, is that I can go into adjustments and then add some output sharpening for print. And this sharpening is only going to be applied to this recipe. and I can do the same with a resized, because I think that when you resize an image, you usually want to add a bit of sharpening to really make it pop. And one way to check that, or basically the only way to check it in Capture One without having to process the image first, is to enable proofing up here. It's the tiny glasses up here. So if you double click on the image to zoom into 100%, this is now what this process recipe is going to create. And this is 2500 pixels, and it looks very small because I have a retina display. But if I change the amount of sharpening for this recipe, you can see that it's getting overly sharpened, and I don't want that. But just a tiny bit to make sure that it still looks sharp even though it's resized. And whatever sharpening you add to a recipe is going to be, of course, only to that recipe. Let's disable this proofing again. Now we have these two recipes ready. I usually don't touch metadata or watermark because I don't put watermarks on my image, especially for private clients. But yeah, you can play around with that if you like, but that's a different webinar. So we now have these two process recipes ready. You're very silent, all of you. There's not a lot of questions.
We're just engrossed. A couple of questions are coming. Don't worry, but
Okay.
I'll keep them at the end. Don't panic.
Okay, great. I was afraid I was talking too fast.
Talking to yourself. Yeah. No. We're all here. Don't worry.
Great. Okay. So what I can do now is, of course, I'm not going to process all of the images, because we are using two recipes, meaning we are creating two files per image, and we are doing it to double the amount of images because there's a black and white version and a color version, meaning that if we take 177 times 4 images that we would process, and we only have 8 minutes left, so that's not going to happen. So what I'll do instead is that I'll select 2 images from each part of the wedding, which I know is split into some of the folders that I made earlier. So this is ceremony, this is portraits, this is reception, and this is dinner. So with these 2 process recipes ticked in the tool here, I can either press process down here, or I can do it the easy way and simply click Command D for develop on my keyboard, or Control D if you're on a Windows computer. So let me just do that, and the process is now going to start. If we just open the Finder and then go to Desktop to find the session that we're in right now. If I click on Output, you can see that it has already created a print and a resized folder, and if I go to the print, you can see that it's populating both these with different parts of the wedding and doing it from the color, because I'm currently processing color images. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now it got to the last part, the dinner. There we go. If I then go to black and white and do the same. So we take some from the ceremony, some from the portraits.
And while you're selecting, Alex, Jim asked if there is a webinar that is purely all about process recipes, and yes, there is. So when you guys get your follow-up email tomorrow, the playlist in there is basically all the webinars that we've ever done for Capture One 10, and there is one purely about process recipes. And as Jim says, as he's coming from Lightroom, process recipes are totally new to him.
Yes.
Which I think if you're coming from Lightroom and you've never seen Capture One before, it's important to appreciate that Capture One is not modal, so we don't have a library module, a develop module, etc. You can do anything at any point and process any time at any point. So once your process recipes are set up, it's just tick them and press process, or even use a shortcut key anywhere in the application to start the processing. But yes, if you want to learn more about process recipes, which you should, then check out that webinar as well.
Yes, I highly recommend it, because knowing exactly what to do with process recipes will make, I would even stretch it and say it will make your life easier and better.
Yes.
Okay, so now I have selected 8 images from the black and white collection from different parts of the wedding. So if I just press Command D, it's going to start the processing once again. And if we go into the Finder and see the result here, it's creating images in black and white under the ceremony. So these images should be, yes, exactly, they are from the from the ceremony. They are in black and white, and they are print sized, as you can see. So if we go to resized, ceremony, black and white, and take this one, you can see it is 2500 on the long edge. So these 2 recipes that I set up, I actually had to delete them from a previous webinar earlier today to show you how to create them from scratch. They are now permanently in my Capture One until I change them. And they are not bound to my session, they are bound to this computer. So when you create a new session, these are going to be there, they're going to remain in your process recipe list. Another important thing to show, we got that question earlier today, is if you usually do weddings and you find yourself having the same type of build-up, or what can you say, the structure of a wedding, and you want to do it like this, or you have found another way to do it, you can simply, after having created all these folders and smart albums ready for color tags, you go up to File and then Save as Template. And then you can save it, for example, call it Wedding, Save. Oh, it's going to replace the one I made earlier today.
Earlier this morning, yep.
Let's do that. And that now means if I go to New, Session, and select Wedding, let's call it David and Alex.
Oh, a happy union.
Click OK. Now we get a perfectly empty session ready to be used called David and Alex, and with color, black and white, and the physical folders that are created, as you can see, within David and Alex and ready to be used. So if you have a fixed way of dividing your images, this could be applied to any other type of job. It doesn't have to be weddings.
Yeah, if you're doing headshots, for example, you could have, your various different folders for like if you were shooting a group of people, for example. If you're doing e-commerce, doing fashion, doing beauty or whatever, there's loads of ways that you could use similar methods for sure.
Yes.
While I think of it, sorry, question from Dick and Gerard, and I can see why they've asked this, because you would think it would be faster, but at the end of the day, it will save them probably 1 second. So, for example, could you process color and black and white at the same time, which you couldn't because you've got 2 different collections. But in the real world, yeah, not with our tokens we're using, because we're using collection name, of course.
I mean, yes, if you don't want to split them up in a color folder and a black and white folder, what you could do is select all images within the 5 stars, the one you have actually edited.
Yep.
And then instead of collection name, you could use the color tag as a token, and then afterwards simply rename red to color and green to black and white. So this would enable you to select all images and have them split up by color tag instead of collection name, because you can only process from one collection at a time.
I do have another idea. You could in the color images, you could set the description in metadata to color, and then you could use the description token to create the folder, if you wanted to do it that way. Yep, that could be one thing you could do.
Just to show how. So if you go to the first, description, color, select all, apply, holding down the shift, of course, and now we have color in the description. And instead of collection name, you go to where is it? Basic?
Basic,
No,
I think.
it's in
Content or whatever.
IPTC.
But if you start typing description, it will pop up. There it is.
You can
so
see
that would work
description,
as well.
color. That's actually a good idea, because then when you do it like that, you don't have to split them up into color and black and white, and you don't have to process twice. You can just be dependent on your
metadata.
Yes.
Yeah, but even processing twice wouldn't actually add much time, because you'd go to your color collection, you do Command A to select all, Command D to process, then you would go to black and white, press Command A to select all, Command D to process. So that doesn't take very long. So even if you had 10 collections, you could do Command A, Command D in 15 seconds, probably.
Yes.
So even though you think, oh, I've got to process each collection individually, it doesn't really have that much time. But you could do the metadata trick if you wanted to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I hope that there was at least a few tricks in this workflow that would help speed up your workflow. I highly recommend, if you want to use sessions, to go and read everything about it, because sessions is really a good way to make sure that you have your raw files and your images exactly where you want them. This means that I can now take the Lisa Paul folder that is the session in here and simply move it to, I have a NAS drive that I use for backup. So I can just take this folder, copy it to my NAS drive, and that will include everything. And it's already split up with the raw files, and the output files are split up into different folders here. So if I need to retrieve any images, or if I, God forbid it, in 5 years no longer use Capture One, I am not bound to open a session. I can simply find the images from outside of Capture One. And I like that reassurance. Not that there should go anything wrong, but I just think that my images should be independent from any software if I want to access them.
Exactly. Question from Ralph. Is there a file number limit when using sessions? Would sessions still work fine with 4,000 to 5,000 images, for example?
It will. Performance will, of course, decrease the more images you have, but the more powerful your computer is, and especially if you work an SSD hard drive, so a solid-state disk, it will work. There's not a limit where we say you cannot import more files, but eventually it's going to slow down, so you don't want to work in that session anymore, because it is folder structured in sessions. And the more folders it has to load and keep track of course, performance will decrease. But I've just seen here, all browsing and moving images was almost instant, and I have 500 raw files in this one. So it's not bad if you want to use maybe 2,000 images.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, on an SSD, whether that's internal, I have these really great I'm sure there's other brands available as well, but Samsung T3 portable SSDs, USB-C, are brilliant, and I think SanDisk do something similar. And even using those external drives, I don't see any performance slowdown as well.
No, that was actually the drive I imported all the images from. I have
there you go. They're fantastic. They're not cheap, but they're super fast and great. Gerard was asking, does it say process recipes in the templates? Process recipes are independent of anything. It is application specific. So if Alex opened up a different catalog or a different session, then you would see exactly the same process recipes. So,
it's saved on your computer.
Saved on your computer, yep. Tim says, could you halt processing, then start 4 other recipes and start processing again? Yes, but you wouldn't even have to halt processing, to be honest.
No, so you can actually just add it to the queue. Yeah.
Maybe if you go to the last tool tab and then images, processing images will pop up in there. You can see down the bottom there's a stop button, so you can stop. There you go. So that's images processing. You can stop or pause, I guess, is probably a better description we should have for that, and then you can stop and start. So if you're processing, you think, hang on a minute, I've just processed all the wrong images, you can stop it, check the list, and then you can always clear them from the list
Yes,
if you
that's
wish.
done up here. Clear queue.
Are adjustments stored in the photos or in the session file? So actually, maybe you can show the little Capture One subfolder.
Very, very good and relevant question, because I could, if I wanted to, delete this session database file, and I would still have all settings and adjustments, because when Capture One works in a session, it's creating a subfolder for each folder that it's accessing. That's called Capture One. That includes cache, so proxies and thumbnails, and settings. So these settings files, that's basically all of your work on your images. And they don't take up many kilobytes, as you can see, but having them next to the image instead of inside the session means that if I at any point, at any time in the future, want to access these files and I want to do it from a different session, I can simply, let's actually just do it. If I go to the new session that I made called David and Alex, this doesn't have anything in it. And working in sessions means you don't even have to import images. You can simply browse it. So if I drag and drop this image into Capture One, whoops, it will
I think you have to be on the browser. No, on the Capture One icon, I think. Try that.
Okay, I will just find it. 2 seconds, because you can basically browse all your folders on your computer like this. So if I go to reception, for example, that might not have been the best folder because I haven't edited. Oh yeah, of course, I've made a black and white version. So this is a completely different session, which I opened this folder in, and it has everything I made in the previous session. So quick access to all of your files with all adjustments from whatever session you are in. That is one of the many benefits of using sessions, I think.
And there's a few people out there who completely ignore all the capture, selects, output, trash, and just use the session as a browser for their entire system. I mean, I think that's fine if you want to do that, but then you also lose out on some of the processing power that we've shown you for the automated stuff as well.
But I actually use it at work many times if I just have 2 images that I need to edit and get a quick JPEG version from. It's tedious to create a new session, import into a folder, blah, blah, blah,
just
blah,
for
blah.
2 images, yep.
So I simply browse the folder with the images. It shows me the images. I edit them, export them, done. I don't even have to create a new catalog or session for that.
I have a session called browsing session just for that.
Yeah,
which
mine is called 2017.
Ralph has a good point, and that probably we might have half answered it for what we were talking about, adjustments, but we can probably show EIP as well. He says many wedding photographers send off images to editing houses for basic color correction, for example, matching white balance. What's the best way to send off a large number of files to editing houses from Capture One for basic black and white correction? Well, I would say if you sent them EIP files, which is enhanced image package, then they will open them into Capture One with all your base corrections, adjustments. If you've applied a style or done some other things, they could do the color corrections in Capture One, send you back EIP files, and it's all good. So you can either export or you can just say pack as EIP, like so.
The thing about that is EIP files are not readable or editable by any other software than Capture One?
No, has to be Capture One. Has to be Capture One.
But of course, everybody uses Capture One, so that's no
right.
problem.
So that's not a problem. Yep.
Otherwise, you could simply zip the entire folder, including the Capture One folder, and that would give the same result.
Yeah, but if you can find a processing house that uses Capture One, then sending EIPs is a really easy way to do it as well. Yeah,
Yes.
fantastic. What was, did I just suddenly forget to ask you something? Oh, also, we had a question this morning. That's what I wanted to point out. Is that we've done everything with raw files here, but if, for example, you did work to every image in Photoshop, like retouching or whatever, you can still process out PSD files, TIFFs, etc., from within Capture One. So don't think this is limited to just raw files only. If, for example, we replaced our 500 selected raw files with 500 PSDs, then we could still use all the processing tips and tricks that you've seen with the automated subfolders, process recipes, and so on. So process recipes work on raw data. They also work on TIFFs, JPEGs, PSDs, PNGs, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess we got to say no to Ralph. Oh no, it was Jim. Said, are EIP files similar to DNG? No, because the DNG file is actually taking the raw file and creating another raw file. All EIP does is package up the manufacturer's raw file, the NEF in this case, and add in the adjustments alongside it, which can be read by Capture One. So no, EIP is not the same as DNG, but I guess DNG can contain adjustments inside it. So the concept is vaguely similar, but not the same.
So just I used the edit with function here, but I came to an obstacle that is my Adobe Creative Cloud on my guest user called Capture One here. So my my Photoshop wouldn't open. But
You got Creative Clouded.
Yeah. So I have my PSD file here, and since Capture One 10.1, Capture One supports PSD files with layers as well. So I could go and edit this, add some layers, do some retouching, save it without flattening it, and everything would be updated in this PSD file, and I could just export it once again.
And process that as a JPEG, TIFF, etc., etc.
Yes, using my recipes here.
Yep.
So I think we can keep talking, but how many questions are left?
I think, and I just got to apologise to Raf for calling him Ralph. So he says no L. So sorry, Raf, about that. That's what happens when you're not reading properly. No, I think we caught all the questions. I think in summary, just to say, like we've touched on many sort of various different things here. It's impossible to cover everything in detail in 1 hour, but personally, I hope we've given you some inspiration for session workflow, which is totally unique to Capture One. And I think if you're tired of catalogs and databases and all that kind of stuff, then a session is a really nice, open, visible way to manage files and folders and keeping everything in one place. And also for the process recipes, again, unique to Capture One. And again, we've scratched the surface with what you can do with tokens. And if you want to see more examples of using tokens, there's a webinar just for that as well. So thank you, Alex, for showing us all that. I'm just going to steal the screen back off you for a second while you play around.
Thank you for letting me geek around.
Definitely. Let me just open this up. So the next webinar is 21st of September. There's a slight gap because I'm on Creative Live on Monday and Tuesday. So if you're in San Francisco area, you can join the live audience if you wish. If you're not in San Francisco, then it's streaming free on Monday and Tuesday. And that's 4 different classes for beginners, 1 purely on color, 1 purely on editing, and 1 purely on workflow, where you can see even more stuff on process recipes if you wish. So yes. If you go to, more process recipes. If you go to Creative Live's website, and then you can simply see, if you look at the calendar on Monday and Tuesday, you can RSVP or hop along on Monday and just grab the live stream as it happens as well. Totally free too. But the next webinar, which is just going to be me, unfortunately, is something we do every month, which is raw processing for a particular kind of photography. So in September, it's travel, city, and landscape. So various tips and techniques you can do then. So less on workflow, more on processing, just so we vary up our content a bit. All right, thanks, Alex, for geeking around and showing us all that good stuff.
Thank you for helping out.
Anytime. If you look out tomorrow, roughly this time tomorrow, you'll see a follow-up email which will have the link to the recording and a few other resources and dates for the forthcoming webinars in September as well. So thanks, Alex, and see you soon. And take care, everyone else.
See ya. Bye.
Take care. Bye.